What you think is true but just can't prove. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the Vancher channel. Also, please share your thoughts on this video in the comments. Let's get started. Story 1. My friend's dad married a black widow, and she will eliminate again. All 3 of her husbands have died shortly after marrying her. She meets new victims at group grief counseling, and I've been in touch with previous victims' families. In all 3 cases, she was the sole inheritor of all funds and property in the wills. My friend knew for a fact her mom wanted her to have certain things, and she died slowly from cancer, so they weren't shy about talking plans after she died. Then when her dad died, she discovered he had updated his will and left everything to the woman he'd only known 8 months. He updated it days before he died. He wasn't in a lot of pain, and she pushed morphine pills on him to help him sleep, and suddenly he's dead. The other families have very similar stories, and she's currently married again. She will eliminate again. I know it. Answer: I hope your friend challenged that will. Changes like that, or disinheriting your children completely, pretty much never holds up in court. The idea that you can write, "Give my shoot kid one," and be done with it is a myth and/or only works if said scion fails to lawyer up and challenge the will. Courts virtually always side with equitable distribution. The downside is, of course, that truly terrible kids are really hard to disinherit. If you want to do that, consult your lawyers to set up living trusts and the like well before you expire. Story 2. That some people pretend to be dumb just to avoid responsibility. And honestly, it works way too well. Answer: I worked with a young accountant who decided to take initiative and do a lunch and learn on how to use Excel. Big mistake, I thought, and was proven correct. Every morning afterwards, there was a line at his desk when he came into the office of people with Excel questions. Never let on you're good with some software. As soon as you become the go-to guy, you'll never be left alone. Story 3. Jason, a kid from down the street, was over at my house. We were playing with my toys and having a great time. After he left, I noticed one of my yo-yos was missing. I'm sure that fudge took it. It was 1979, so I think any proof is long gone. Answer: I've got a similar story, but a much greater loss from a value standpoint. I was an idiot kid that thought it would be a good idea to bring a bunch of NES games to a friend's house. It was right after Christmas, and along with new games, I got a 10-game carry case. I show up with a full case of games, and before going in, he says we should play tag in the yard. He told me to sit the case on the back bumper of his dad's truck. We play for 15 minutes and come back around front, and the case is missing. His dad said he just drove up to the store and back, a few minutes up the road. My parents drove that stretch of road 10 times and never found anything. To this day, I know they never moved the car and just stole all my shoot. Story 4. Here in New Zealand, there's been a recent flood of cheap appliances, fridges, TVs, fudge vacuum cleaners, all sorts of stuff. Prices cheaper than usual. Specials beyond what's normal. My theory is that these appliances have been shipped here due to the American tariff situation impacting sales of them in the States. Those appliances have to go somewhere, and when there's an oversupply of something in a market, prices drop. Can't prove any of this, of course. It's just my theory. Story 5. That every single person you meet has some tiny story or little quirk that could totally change the way you see them if you just dug a bit. Like someone could seem totally ordinary, but there's some wild, amazing, or heartbreaking part of their life that just doesn't come out unless you're really paying attention. I can't prove it because you can't know everyone's private world, but I just feel it every time I meet someone new. Makes life kind of magical. Answer: I love to learn about people out of genuine curiosity, and I truly care. I think everyone is unique, and I like to learn what it is that makes them unique. I don't seek this out, but I think that gives off a vibe that makes people share their life stories with me without me having to ask. I've found that there are very few people I dislike because everyone has such an interesting story somewhere. Story 6. There are way more secret intimacy groups for the rich and powerful than we will ever know about that exploit and harmful behavior children. Story 7. Aliens exist somewhere out there. It would be much stranger if we were the only planet with life in such a mind-meltingly massive universe. Answer: I honestly don't even rule out them having visited us. I know that while the technology seems impossible to us right now, imagine someone in 1825 try to describe all the crazy stuff we have in 2025. Then imagine what we might have in 2125. And that imagine what a planet like ours, where its equivalent of humans got started even 10,000 years earlier than we did. I don't think it's too crazy to think that someone out there figured out how to make zipping around the universe using sciences we don't understand yet in order to study and document life on other planets. Earth space programs would be losing their minds wanting to go examine some alien protozoa on the opposite side of our solar system, so I can totally see some insanely advanced civilization doing the same with us. Story 8. Devices with microphones are always listening, not just when the app is being used or running in the background. I mean, the microphone is always on. Everything I've researched says otherwise, but there's no convincing me. Answer: just last night I watched a film with some Japanese parts in it. This morning I was piddling around the kitchen and remembered an old Japanese friend of mine, and I said her name out loud a few times as I was talking to myself and wondering what she was up to these days. A few hours later I get on IG, and whose is the first story recommended to me? Mind you, it had been years since I'd even thought about this girl. My phone is a dirty little spy. Story 9. The NFL injury rate is increasing because the percentage of athletes that are now at transhuman speed strengths while remaining in a more or less human body has increased significantly. Basically, we are reaching the limits of what the human body can withstand and then moving past that line with almost every player. What used to be a top one in athleticism is now much more commonplace, so they stand out a lot less too. Story 10. I have a friend from the past that died from what they say he took a pill with his friend, and that's what eliminated him. A few years later, during Hurricane Ian, and I was in South Florida staying in a motel, went to Walgreens or CVS to get some supplies for the incoming storm, and when I walked in, I saw him. I was so flabbergasted and staring at him, and he was wearing sunglasses inside, but it looked like he was doing the same to me. I had my kid with me that kept asking me something and had to divert my gaze to answer. Kept walking to the aisle I needed to be and looking back over my shoulder to look because I couldn't believe my eyes. Got to the aisle and crouched down to get what I needed, and I hear in a hushed, shocked voice, in a female's voice, "It's insert my name here." I grabbed the item and rushed back up front to go confront him, and they're gone. Went and creeped his wife's FB, and her location was where he was spotted at, so I'm pretty sure he faked his passing for whatever reason. Out of all my friends, he would be voted most likely to fake his passing. He was probably my number one sketchy, shady friends from back in the day. No one believes me, and when I have said anything about it, I've been told maybe it was a doppelganger, but I know who I saw and what I heard. Story 11. Some people can feel a person's real intentions long before they show it. I cannot prove it, but I believe it is true. Answer: I think I have some of this. I'm a pretty good judge of character, and I feel like I know within 5 minutes of meeting someone. There may have been a handful of times when I've been wrong, maybe, but I can really only think of one. It happens rarely, but sometimes when I meet someone, I will get an extremely intense feeling of unease or negativity. Recently, a friend of my fiancée introduced us to her new boyfriend. I immediately got this feeling that was so strong I was pinching my fiancée's back without even knowing it. Turns out the dude is a serial conman manipulator that was after our newly divorced friend's money. For the record, I'm not religious or even spiritual. Story 12. The whole culture war going on right now is orchestrated by the elites to keep the lower classes divided and distracted from the real problem that is inequality. In other words, what the fudge happened to Occupy Wall Street? Answer: in other words, what the fudge happened to Occupy Wall Street? They failed to turn public interest in reform into actual political power. They didn't challenge sitting politicians. They didn't engage in disruptive behavior. They didn't even develop a cohesive series of demands. They just sat around in parks where they could easily be ignored until people got bored of them arguing with each other. Story 13. A collective unconscious exists in some form. I know it's likely just a mix of confirmation bias and not having a comprehensive data set, but sometimes it feels like it exists. Answer: I remember a historical study of sleep paralysis visions concluded that this was likely the case. Everyone in a given area and time would have nearly identical experiences. In the late 20th century, it was basically always aliens, but it used to be vampires in the past, or succubi. As you may know, the aliens in these visions were always the same height, shape, color, and had the same facial features. They looked into the people that had the visions, and some weren't even into aliens or UFOs before having their sleep paralysis episodes. The researchers concluded this suggests the experience itself is influenced by a collective subconscious concept of what these experiences should be like, and that the people involved might not even be aware of it at a conscious level. Story 14. I believe that a large portion of social media profiles are made up of bots that are designed to sway your opinion. Too many times I've had people respond and I've clicked on the profiles only to find there was really nothing there that signified they were an actual human. Story 15. All animals are smarter than we have been led to believe. We as a society have chosen not to try to communicate with so many intelligent animals. Answer: we had a pair of grackles, birds, try to nest in our dryer vent over our patio one spring. I had an all-out war with these fuckers for like an entire month. Every time we would block it, it would be ripped off the next morning. Finally, we found this industrial vent cover, and there was no way they were getting through. The next morning, I walked out to see one perfectly placed pansy flower I had just planted directly at the foot of the door. Still makes me laugh to this day. Story 16. I believe giving reviews have eliminated quality both in product and service. Most everyone gives a review of a service received, product used, or medical professional after the first visit, experience, or product used. But if we paused 5 years, either the company or reputation would speak for itself, or we'd be able to share that the stove is completely falling apart, the dentist is a prick, or the shirt is in the garbage after 1 year of being worn and washed. Meanwhile, BC, of all the quick good reviews, the company has profited from cheap production and cutting corners, and probably making enough to push out another crap product. Story 17. Very rich people from Eastern countries deliberately fund and promote culture wars in the West to encourage the crumbling of our societies. Story 18. Happy Meals are a cynical ploy by McDonald's to psychologically buy you as a lifetime customer. It's no coincidence that every fussy eater kid will cram down nuggies like crack addicts. Answer, it's no coincidence that every fussy eater kid will cram down nuggies like crack addicts. Sure it is. I was a very fussy eater kid long before McDonald's was commonplace in my part of the world. And even if it were, my parents would never have taken us there. I didn't even have a McDonald's burger until I was 13, and their nuggets until I was 16. I totally cram them down like a crack addict when I have them. Story 19. The federal government has been pushing for speakers and internet access to be installed on home appliances so they can use them to snoop. Story 20. The aliens we all believe in actually live in the undiscovered parts of the ocean rather than space. Story 21. Humans give off and have the ability to sense something akin to electrical signal activity, kind of like a shark. We haven't figured out how to measure it yet, but it would be why we can tell if someone is looking at us or whether we're alone in a room, for example. Story 22. Our entire universe exists within a black hole. The Big Bang was just a black hole being created, and all the matter was spread across mass distances, creating gases which over time became planets. The expanding universe is due to the black hole that we reside in getting bigger and spewing more dark matter into our universe, increasing the space between matter particles. Answer, this hypothesis was formally posited by theoretical physicist Lee Smolin in the 1990s in his book, Life of the Cosmos. He goes much further than this, applying the principles of biological natural selection to the cosmological scale in a sort of ever-expanding tree of nested universes scenario. The mechanism for selection comes from allowing the free parameters of the standard model of physics to be slightly altered at each white hole singularity event by some hereto unknown quantum effects. Then a natural selective process can take hold, where universes are selected for the propensity to produce more black holes. Invoking the René DNA analogy, he suggests that maybe in lower-order universes, there are only primordial black holes. But given enough iterations, universes eventually start producing galactic black holes, then stellar black holes, and so forth. Going further, maybe the purpose of organized life comes down to a likelihood that exponentially increasing energy requirements inevitably drive species ecosystems towards either extinction or creating black holes either deliberately or indirectly incidentally. Story 23. I think most people have at least one life-changing moment they never talk about, but it quietly shaped who they are forever. I can't prove it, but it feels universally true. Story 24. Mattress stores are a front for substances. Maybe not all of them, but I feel definitely most of them, especially those ones that are tucked away and never have any traffic. Story 25. Investing in poor people will show huge cultural and economic gains. Ignoring the argument of who deserves it most will make it easier to implement. Story 26. Those overseas factories making luxury class items like Yeti coolers and name brand clothes, I'm convinced after fulfilling their required production numbers, they then turn around and make the exact same items using the exact same design and materials, then turn around and sell their version on Temu for much less and still make a profit. I've bought backpacking camping chairs on Temu that cost you 10 with a brand name like Happy Sunshine, and I then compared them to my cousin's name brand chair that looks the same but cost 180. They are identical in every way. The casting marks on the plastic feet, the tread pattern, the fabric, and even the stitchings are identical. The only difference is the name and price. Answer, can confirm. My mom used to sell designer clothing wholesale. When she got to know factory owners well, she would buy the Nun-branded versions for us and other loved ones. What's quite common is a factory will make something, say a Stanley flask, and they come to the end of the contract and lose their rights to a competitor, they'll keep making the same product under an unknown, or even keep the branding logo and sell it on AliExpress, etc. If it looks like an amazing fake, there's every possibility the only fake thing about it is licensing. Story 27. I think that giving kids phones and tablets from age 2 or even younger is messing up, for lack of a better word, their imagination, or at least affecting their lifetime cognitive development in unknown ways. Some of it might be good, but I have a feeling that not all of it is. Kids' toys are traditionally quite cute, a lump of plastic or wood at the end of the day. It's only your imagination and boundless energy, coupled with your brain wanting to form new connections, that turn that crap bit of wood into a steed, or lump of plastic into a spaceship taking you to far-off lands. Now, endless YouTube videos for kids use addiction algorithms to keep you watching and watching, and they deliver everything without you having to do anything but watch passively. Audio-visual rich in every aspect is being beamed into your nascent developing brain. That has to have effects that no prior generation was ever subject to. Story 28. I haven't been the same since having COVID in 2021. I don't have long COVID, but everything from my energy level to my focus to my menstrual cycles have never been the same. Story 29. That all online gambling slots are rigged. This is something you can't convince me to be false. I have gambled for years playing online slots, and I have noticed patterns. Now, how they're rigged is not obvious and is pretty darn hard to actually prove. Answer: a friend had a mathematics degree. When he got a job right out of college, it was programming the gambling machines to be used in Vegas. He said he had to quit immediately BC. The combination of psychology and math was too depressing. He took a very boring job as an accountant instead, but his job is no longer to purposely convince addicted players to keep paying. Story 30. That some things are impossible. I quite firmly believe that there are an infinite number of impossibilities, but I can't prove a negative, not a single one. Story 31. Grocery store baggers being let go, so customers could start bagging their own groceries, which lead to self-checkout, and nobody questioned it. Story 32. If corporate and foreign interests lobbying were criminalized, Americans' lives would be multiple times better in short order. Story 33. I can fix a computer just by touching because it appreciates that I'm nice to it in other computers. I've made half a career out of it. When I start fixing a PC, printer, phone, whatever, the first thing I do is give it attention that seems silly to anyone else. I wipe it down really well with cleaning wipes so it looks nice. I give it love and attention, and they appreciate me. Answer: me and my dad have a similar knack. I distinctly remember as a child the family computer bugging out, calling my dad over to have a look, and as soon as he enters the room and I try to reproduce the error, it works perfectly. Now, as an adult, same thing has happened in my workplace. Coworker calls me over because their computer is bugging out. I come take a look over their shoulder, and it works perfectly. He liked to joke that computers fear him, and his presence scares them into submission. Story 34. The world is run by no more than 50 to 100 people. I saw a YouTube video with a similarly worded title a few weeks ago. Didn't watch it, but I have felt and have said this for years. Answer: I'll apply Occam's razor and provide an easier explanation. Much like there are fundamentally only 36 possible story plots, there are probably less than 50 to 100 core motivations. Reduce your subset to the ultra-rich, and you narrow it down more. Apply the power imbalance that being rich provides, and you've got all the most powerful people generally promoting the same few motivations by similar means. And the most predictable outcome from that is what you see around you today. Conspiracy simply isn't a necessary prerequisite. Story 35. Mankind has had a couple iterations on this planet, but due to our current knowledge, we will never know this. Story 36. Dogs communicate telepathically. Every time I pet one dog or give a snack, the other dog will run into the room. Can't possibly have seen the first dog getting pampered. Crazy. Answer: there was a show documentary from the UK a while back that was taking about how dogs know when you are coming home. There was a lady whose dog would be sit and wait for her by her window. The dog would start sitting there about 20 minutes before. She put cameras and would come home at different times, and the dog would go and sit 20 minutes before she got home, regardless of the time. My dogs do this too. Whenever I get home, they are outside by the gate waiting. I may be gone a couple of hours or a quick outing, and they are always there. And don't get me started on the dogs who can smell illness. The same show a lady had a dog who would smell her breast and cry. She had a mamo, and she had breast cancer. After she had it removed, the dog stopped crying. Story 37. The Amtrak crash on Philadelphia in May 2015 was caused by early teenagers throwing rocks into passing trains from the overpass. All day long, there were police reports of kids hurling rocks on top of trains. One rock was timed perfectly and went through the windshield, hitting the engineer driving the train. This worker had a reputation of a safety, pedantic meanie. He was listening to the radio hearing about these rock strikes. He got hit. He was knocked out. The train went too fast through the upcoming curve. The train derailed. Many passengers were hurt and died. This was the equivalent of a terrorist attack on infrastructure. You can't claim a mass casualty event on board middle schoolers freshmen. The engineer took the heat for the event when it was a systemic failure. Story 38. Some things truly do happen for a reason. When I saw my cat's ad at the shelter, I just knew he was the one. And I got him, and it felt like he's always been here in a way I can't really explain. Then his exciting medical issues got worse. The shelter did provide me his medical history, so I knew he had it. I just didn't know it would turn into this later. And now he's on an expensive diet and meds. A lot of people would have dumped him at a shelter or euthanized too soon, but I keep putting him first because I love him. I know he's getting closer to that inhumane line, but for now, I know he's loved and has a vet nearby that knows him and his medical history. I'm his second home, and he spent most of his life in that shelter. From kitten to adopted to quickly returned to adopted by me later. He is home, and when it's time to say goodbye, he'll feel love. It hurts me, but I know I'm giving him something so many cats will never know. I'm giving this cat the best possible chance and the most amount of love I can for as long as it's humane. He may recover one day, but he may not. He has urinary crystals and is on pains twice a day. He's still happy, cuddly, and playful, but the pain sometimes comes back midday. I talk to his vet often so everyone is on the same page. 3 crystals won't dissolve, and he has another UA next month. No blockages so far, but he has strained in the past. Hug your fur babies for me. Time is never guaranteed, and they're in your life for reasons none of us will ever truly understand. Love them the way they love you, truly unconditionally. Story 39. My former boss alleged to the entire company that I was stealing thousands of dollars after I put in my notice. They did so without providing any proof of their suspicions. Their family member, that I spent an insane amount of time training and forced to promote despite the fact that she was awful at her job, was arrested last week for stealing said thousands of dollars over the course of 4 years. My former boss had to know. Numbers started looking insane after their family member was hired, and the thefts continued long after I was gone. They thought, I'll just say that angry black lady who whined about not getting paid enough did it, and her family member would have gotten away with it if it weren't for that meddling forensic accountant. Story 40. Parallel dimensions that we visit in our dreams. I've had dreams where I go and visit another life in another city with the same people I know, almost the same but slightly different. Story 41. That there are major intertwined conspiracies among the ultra-rich and various billionaires to keep the bulk of humanity ignorant and enslaved under their control. Story 42. Cornwall, Ontario is the cancer capital of Canada. The former Domtar paper plant and other heavy industries contaminated the water table in and around the town. There is toxic waste buried behind the Walmart. Almost all of the cancer patients are treated in Ottawa, and they are counted in Ottawa statistics, which hides where people are actually from. Everyone that lives in that town gets cancer. Everyone. The government hides the data because the whole town would be condemned and sealed off if were to get out. Story 43. That there is enough food, money, and resources to feed, clothe, and house every family in the world. Unfortunately, beat people are too greedy and would never let it happen. Story 44. The Earth and space are part of a larger biological system, and we are simply so small that we can't comprehend space to be something akin to a biological fluid encased in a membrane, and that everything happening on Earth probably only has the larger purpose of altering the temperature of things in a very mild way. While at the same time, everything smaller than us is absolutely packed with tiny life clusters that we are too arrogant to consider as similarly important and relatively advanced as ourselves, which are performing tasks that feel as significant to them as our own feel to us, but to our perception, they only have the larger purpose of altering the temperature of things in a very mild way. Story 45. Half, maybe more of Americans just drift through their day in a blissful fog and aren't truly self-aware. Answer, I think it's more that there are a lot of people on autopilot, overworked, overtired, taking care of their families, and are just doing their best to get by. So many people are working multiple jobs to make ends meet. Add in trying to spend some meaningful time with kids, spouse, take care of an elderly parent, get up and do it all again the next day. I mean, just look at our coffee consumption. Story 46. that whenever I stand too long looking at something at the grocery store, the universe sends in a bunch of extras to look at exactly what I'm looking at. Story 47. Intelligent life exists on other planets, or at least has at some point. The observable universe is estimated over 90 billion light years across and nearly 15 billion years old. Earth is one of over 1,000 planets in the observable universe. At some point in those 15 billion years, one of those quadrillion planets has hosted intelligent life or will host intelligent life. That said, I believe that whatever life did exist is way too far away from us and we from it to ever cross paths. There aren't little green men from Mars stealing cows and crashing in New Mexico, but there is something out there, and I think the uncertainty is more fascinating than whatever the X-Files could dish out. Story 48. The introduction of the stock market eliminate the economy by causing businesses to prioritize short-term profits over sustainability and being good corporate citizens, and venture capitalism is like vultures if they didn't actually serve an ecological purpose. Story 49. DJT has been diagnosed with some form of dementia and is being given, maybe experimental, substances via infusion. Story 50. I genuinely believe some people have good vibe or bad vibe energy you can feel instantly, even though it's impossible to measure or prove. Story 51. Joe Rogan actually has no idea what's happening. Now he just responds to stimuli like anything basic fungus. Story 52. That the draining of all the oil from underground is causing the increase in earthquakes. The oil is acting like a shock absorber, and without it, earthquakes are getting much more severe. Story 53. I used to be darn near automatic with getting a perfect pump every time. Over the years, I've noticed that it's become a lot more difficult to do so, usually a few cents over. Not a big deal, right? Well, in my mind, I would not put it past oil companies to have made it more difficult to stop the pump exactly where you want it. A few cents for a single person isn't going to cause an issue, but if you extrapolate that over time with millions of Americans pumping gas every single minute of the day, those extra few cents add up and create more profit. That's my only tinfoil hat theory, but I support it as a theory. Story 54. The universe will eventually converge into one singularity that compresses so tightly and tiny that it becomes unstable and explodes as a new Big Bang and rebirths the universe all over again. Story 55. James Patterson books sell so many copies because stodgy businesses and institutions buy them for lobby bookshelves, precisely because they're so generic and cookie cutter, and not many people actually read them. They all sell 11 billion copies, but I have never once in my life heard anyone talk about a James Patterson book except Maximum Ride. Even the ones that got made into movies, I've never heard anyone discuss the books. Answer, he used to. Incoming rant about Patterson. LOL, Patterson is the Amazon of books. He hasn't written an actual book in years. In the late 90s, his Alex Cross was very good. He's probably one of the only authors I've read that do huge branding type of themselves. IRC, he's also the richest author in the world. He's a sellout. I can't stand seeing his million new books every time I go to the new section in the library. It's ridiculous, and I believe a lot of what you said too. It's oversaturated for some odd reason. The books he co-writes these days have been shoot for a long time. Story 56. That a lot of our self-destructive behavior is a result of evolution. What enabled us to survive before is detrimental now. Tribalism alone is a pox on civilization. Story 57. I believe that everyone has intuition, but some people are more in tune than others. And it's not always something that makes logical sense with scientific proof, but sometimes it makes sense later, with different things that happens that give confirmations after the fact. Story 58. Ever since COVID, we've been collectively riding this emotional roller coaster. And I think, but can't prove, it has something to do with nutrition deficiencies. We had a behavioral shock, more adult beverage, less sunlight, more isolation, microplastics, cortisol. IDK, I'm not an expert. Everyone could blast their gut with a daily vitamin, probiotic, and electrolyte, and we can see if this mass depression lifts. Story 59. I've thought for a while now that we have done this evolution cycle before on this planet. So many unanswered questions about artifacts that we have found make me wonder how good carbon dating really is. But aside from that, it's mostly just a feeling I have that we have truly been here before. Story 60. Reincarnation. I do think it's true. It's scientific fact that energy can't be destroyed, and so the human body, IMO, is just a vehicle for that energy that gives us consciousness. There's circumstantial evidence to back it up, but obviously can't be proven. Story 61. Traffic isn't real most of the time. Oftentimes, I'm driving in stop-and-go traffic. When I finally make it past the pack, I see there's only a couple cars driving way under the speed limit in every lane, trapping everyone behind them. This is the case almost every time. Story 62. We can talk to or signal each other in dreams. These fears are getting way too vivid and specific, lol. Story 63. There are beings beyond this reality. Not gods, not angels or demons, but sentience, not unlike ourselves. There are realities like ours, with growth and evolution, the same as we observe and experience. Consciousness bridges all of this, and these realities are generated and influenced by our understanding of it and the outcomes we focus on. Story 64. Democrats and Republicans are actually working together to keep the rest of us divided. Behind closed doors, they agree on everything and only play up issues to keep the rest of us distracted. Story 65. Most of the time, I'm a nihilist, believing that there is no deeper meaning or purpose to the universe. But every now and then, in my darker moments, I can't help noticing just how utterly strange and ironic most of the shoot in reality seems to be. It's in those moments that I can't help thinking that not only might there be some sort of being or entity that's actually in control of everything, but whoever or whatever that is has one fudge-up sense of humor. Story 66. Oh, I already gave one, but a second one is that movies are made to prepare people or desensitize us so we will be more open to things. Story 67. My uncle married a woman who had 4 husbands before him. She didn't eliminate her husbands, but she changed her name and stuff each time. And each time she took everything they had. They dated for years before they got married. They were married for a year, and one day he came home to the house empty. Nothing. She took clothes, furniture, appliances, lawnmowers, you name it. The place looked like it had never been lived in. All credit cards maxed out, all accounts emptied. She taped the divorce papers to the front door. He hired a private investigator and found out about the previous 4 husbands in multiple aliases. She then married a rich guy and tried to pull the same crap and ended up in prison. She did 5 years and was released on parole, then promptly disappeared. She never showed up to a single check-in with her parole officer. She had warrants in multiple states and was even on the most wanted list. Multiple agencies looking for her, and she was just gone. We all think the rich guy had her eliminate. Nobody can prove anything, but her last known appearance was in the town where he lived at a gas station. This was 25 years ago. It's a cold case by now. My aunt, his sister, keeps tabs on it because she wants to see her get justice. We all think justice has already been served. Story 68. Bigfoot was real at some point, even if he's not anymore. There are great apes in several other places in the world. So it isn't like unicorns or Mothman. Heck, we know a great ape existed in North America that we have fossils of. The ecology of North America changed dramatically during colonization, which we know led to the extinction of dozens of species. Multiple Native American tribes have oral history of a Bigfoot-like creature. It is so not crazy to think that maybe Bigfoot was a great ape who we eliminate off before we could document it with hard evidence. Yet you get blackballed in science for even considering researching it. It is mind-blowing that it is so taboo, when it is literally just an animal from a group that currently exists around the world that we don't know for sure existed in this specific location during a time that overlapped with humans. I mean, it's not like fossil animals have never existed concurrently with humans either. Look at coelocans. Story 69. Several of the native alliums called wild onion in Virginia have bulbs that can get so suspiciously large in good soil that I think they aren't so much wild as feral descendants of cultivated crops. I think these were domesticated by Native Americans, but never adopted by European colonists because they brought their own preferred onions and garlic with them to grow. I have looked for peer-reviewed science examining these plants' genomes for signs of past domestication, but it didn't seem like any scientist had ever considered the question. Story 70. There's a brewery local to me that named their new beer coldie, which is my word. I know they've heard us say it and took it. I don't care. I just want to know it's mine, lol. Story 71. I visit my somewhat elderly mom most Sundays. I'm convinced she makes up that there are mice because she thinks I will only visit if she needs me. There's never any evidence of mice, and I've been putting down traps and poison for months. I tell her that I would visit anyway, but she still does it. Story 72. Math is the fabric of everything, and science identifies the coding. It's not because something designed it, it simply is, and we either observe or dismiss it. Story 73. Just like NFTs and cryptocurrency before it, are just elaborate money laundering efforts for the world's ultra-wealthy. As a bonus, it also allows them to siphon off the moderately wealthy or dumb shits who think they can leverage their expertise into becoming part of that elite when really they're just being robbed. Story 74. People are getting worse at communicating, like the title of this very post. I swear I'm noticing regular misspeaks everywhere, including mainstream news. It used to be extremely rare. Seems we've let our standards slide a lot. Story 75. Extinct prehistoric animals are weirder than we can ever imagine, but since less than one of all species that ever existed ever get preserved in the fossil record, there's just some we may never get to know. Story 76. My phone is always on and listening, feeding data to companies, which is immediately available to Amazon to appear in ads. Story 77. When you dream, you are just visiting other timelines. When I dream and see my mom, I don't think, oh shoot, you're alive. It's just normal, and we have normal conversations. Many of my waking moments, I am thinking about her passing and how I miss her. In these dreams, she is sober and even does normal things like works a job and owns a car. I believe there are alternate timelines, realities where my mom gets to live a real, impactful human existence and didn't die at 39 from years of substances, harmful behavior. One where she was raised by two loving parents, neither of which harmful behavior substances or harmful behavior her allowed men to harmful behavior her. She was sober when she died, but the decades of meth coupled with her many health conditions deteriorated her body. My dad died of an overdose when I was 19. I can't remember how old he was. Maybe 39 too. That's been 10 years now, and I never, ever see him in my dreams anymore, though I wish I did. I don't know what that means about my theory. Maybe he died in each timeline because he never found one where he lived a normal life. We weren't close, but I do miss him. I choose to believe my theory, even if it's silly, because I want my mom to be happy somewhere. She had a really hard life and was truly never given a chance. Sorry, mine was dark. Much of my life is, but this prompt was actually cathartic for me. So thanks for the thought provocation. Story 78. People get sucked into sports fanaticism and political affiliations because it feels good to be a part of something, a tribe. Story 79. Big Oil is funding false flag climate protests to discredit climate activists, like those idiots that block highways and throw oil at painting in museums and stuff, with the aim to poison public opinion against said activism. Story 80. That many people who had ADHD and/or autism were the hunters of human societies. It's not until very recent times, looking at a large-scale perspective, that our brain adaptations have been considered abnormal. Neurotypical people were people like the craftsmen, gatherers near the settlement, and farmers. Our brains are so physically different and that it can be seen clearly with modern scans. We, ADHD folks and/or autistic people, have the ability to comfortably sort the ton of sensory information in natural settings to pick out what is important. And with enough of the right kind of sensory input, we don't have the nearly same level of focus distraction as we exhibit indoors in artificial environments. Our brains work faster to move and communicate as a group and constantly adapt to changing conditions. Our hyperfocus helps us to track prey for long periods of time and to learn and evaluate their behaviors. Humans hunted by tracking, following, and harassing groups of prey for long distances until dehydration and/or exhaustion impacts the weakest and makes them easy to eliminate. And once enough were eliminated, other skills had to be used to harvest everything useful and prepare most of the carcasses for transport back to the settlement. And our lack of time tracking wouldn't be a problem because long-term hunting doesn't happen on any schedule. The hunters have to move once it is light enough for a herd to move, making noise, and to stay up a while after dark, long enough to hunt the weak animals and after the pack of prey settles down for the night or for doing chores. Napping during the day to make up the hours would be common as the prey animals nap too. So specialization would have been a disadvantage. So hunting favored people who knew and could perform a lot of different skills like we do. It takes a long time for evolutionary traits to change, and some do not. The Industrial Revolution was the beginning of the change into societies that strongly favored the neurotypical traits and penalized ours. The information age has changed societies enough that we are valued for some of our traits in creative fields, like design, art, library sciences, and IT. The last can be far more creative than most people think. But when placed in the typical office environment of exact schedules, minimal or the wrong sensory inputs, specialization and repetition, restricted communication, and near constant supervision, you can see why a hunter brain would struggle to perform, much less excel. Exhaustion and burnout from trying soon follow, unless some accommodations are granted. And to people who work best in an indoor and familiar environment, those accommodations often look like unfair privileges when they are necessary tools for us. A wheelchair looks like being allowed to sit and be moved without your effort, which is a privilege if you consider it out of the context of the person's need to function. TL, doctor, generally speaking, neurotypicals were the settled people, and neurodivergents were hunters. We humans evolved our brains to perform very different roles in different environments. In very modern times, neurotypicals punish neurodivergents for those differences. Story 81. The universe arranges events in such a way as to maximize your perceived waste of time. Ever notice how every mundane action becomes a time-wasting problem when you're in a hurry? Ever notice how motivation to do something only comes before the perfect opportunity arises? Yes, that 3 a.m. motivation? Story 82. People can tell the future in limited forms. I had a dream about the towers falling just days before they fell. Wrote about the weird dreams in my diary, as I have never been to New York or even knew what the towers were. I found it years later and burned the pages. But there is no reason a 7-year-old should have had a vivid dream about watching a plane crash and then watch the towers fall when they don't even know what they are. Story 83. I believe my grandpa was taken down by staff at his long-term care facility during the pandemic. He had dementia with some behavioral issues. Most of the time, he was just confused, and he was usually such a gentle and sweet man. The facility told us they could handle patients with dementia and with some troubling behaviors. Then he got in a fight with another individual at the care home. Both were fine but taken to the hospital for monitoring. The care facility refused to take him back. After fighting it for a while, they eventually relented and brought him back from the hospital. But shortly after, he caught COVID. He was in isolation for a couple weeks until he had no more symptoms at all and was supposed to be let out of isolation the next day. He died that night with no explanation other than he died of COVID. Because COVID was his official cause of passing, an autopsy wasn't covered and would have to privately be done. Thousands of dollars out of pocket, which my grieving grandmother just couldn't fathom. Everyone says he died of some natural cause, but I think the staff just didn't want to deal with him anymore and had a convenient cover with the pandemic. There's no way to prove it now, but I think he'll always believe foul play was involved there. Story 84. A good number of bosses make their companies less efficient and borderline chaotic because they know if they let it run smoothly, their higher-ups will do to them what they would do to lower-tier workers. Phase them out to streamline things. This way, they can get by on the promise of improvement but never deliver. Story 85. Neanderthals died out by genocide from humans. It wasn't interbreeding that got us Neanderthal DNA, but the violation and takedown that humans have been known for since the beginning of recorded time. All the documentaries act like it was rainbows and sunshine when humans don't act that way to other humans. Never mind a completely different species that isn't sharing their hunting grounds or fresh water. Answer. I have never seen a documentary make it look like rainbows and sunshine. Sounds like you're projecting. As for the takedown and violation part, what do you think the Neanderthals were like? There likely was a lot of violence back then, but it surely went both ways. Our ancestors are just the ones who won. This isn't really an indictment of humans any more than it is an indictment of any other species. Story 86. A lot of genuine ignorance isn't the fault of the afflicted person, but there are people who know they're stupid and choose not to change, not because they don't think they're capable, but because it benefits them to stay ignorant. I can't ethically blame people who have become stupid for reasons beyond their control, and there are people who see that and take advantage of it. They use what skills they do have to avoid learning. Story 87. I could float when I was a toddler. I remember quite distinctly floating down the stairs, standing on air to reach things, and bobbing down from a garage roof. I've tried doing it again, but with no luck. Story 88. Something I don't necessarily think is true, but is at least plausible. We all know that Venus and Mars were habitable in their distant past. Is it possible humans were originally from there, realized they were fudge, saw Earth as a possible planet to move to, but they had to do something about those pesky dinosaurs first, so redirected the asteroid to eliminate them off? Sounds absolutely insane, but is it impossible? Story 89. Life began on Earth when a comet with a virus embedded in it crashed into the planet, and the virus developed a symbiotic relationship with coacervates in the primordial sea. Story 90. The ultra-wealthy, public figures who we think are in power are all actually controlled by only a few ultra-wealthy individuals. Story 91. There's a group of people who know when I'm going to the store and purposely stand in my way everywhere I go. Knowing I have anxiety about saying excuse me, the conspiracy runs deep and wide. Story 92. Car mechanics purposefully mess up things when fixing your car to keep you coming back to them with new issues. Story 93. Tire stores purposely don't stock the cheaper tires so they can persuade those that need tires quickly to buy the more expensive ones. Story 94. The CIA is treating the entire planet like a vault-tech social experiment, and I think every single person of power and wealth during the time has been to the Epstein Island. Not because they knew anything, but because they were originally told that it was an exclusive resort for celebrities and people of wealth. TBH, if I weren't allowed to go to a Hawaii resort without getting harassed by paparazzi, it'd go to a private island if I were invited. It's likely the CIA created this island to control as many people as they could, including and especially future presidents. You want to say no to the government? Well, do you remember that little island we invited you to last year? Yeah. It sure would be unfortunate if there was proof of you lounging around by the pool. Also, it's likely the Diddy parties are a replica of the island, and we'll soon find out some crazy stuff about it until a new project comes to light. A project that's most likely already going on or being set up. Story 95. Point shaving by sports officials, especially in the NBA, is rampant due to all of the sports betting going on now. Story 96. My husband has at least a decade-long history of adult worker calls. I caught him requesting earlier this year, but I can't prove anything happened then. But there's 2 other instances that I'm sure went through. Can't prove any of it, though. And he says that one time I caught him was a fluke. I know it wasn't. I have seen convos over the last 10 years, before we got together, of requests. Currently worried the desire is back and trying not to go crazy about it. If I can't prove anything, I look like the psycho wife. Story 97. I had a poltergeist. One time I had a friend over and there was a loud bang downstairs. A small ornamental jar was no longer on the back of the toilet, but across the room where it fell after hitting the wall. I told her it was just George, but she refused to ever come to my place again. I lived in an apartment that was in a building that once been an old schoolhouse. Never bothered me. Story 98. We all have holes in our butts, and we don't talk about it enough. I can't prove that we don't talk about it enough, but I'm pretty sure we don't look at the person sitting next to you. There's a hole in their butt. Your favorite elementary school teacher, your cousin, and every UN leader has a hole in their butt. Story 99. Trees have self-aware spirits living in them, and they appreciate tokens of respect. Look, I'm a 21st century technologically adept woman with a graduate degree and a professional job. But I once placed my hand on a bent-over oak in southern Germany and had an immediate flash of recognition. I saw the spirit of that tree, and it was a happy, happy old man, like Fat Buddha happy. At my current house, we have an ash tree growing in the backyard, and every equinox and solstice we go out and hang charms and ornaments in its branches and pour fancy liquor around its roots. Since we've been doing this, the tree is stronger and greener and leafier, and I swear, happier. Can I prove any of this? Of course not, but it's true. Story 100. I hypothesize that some memories can be genetically transferred because when I was a baby, I'd dream about my rose garden. The dreams gradually became less frequent, and I was always so happy to return to my rose garden. I had the last dream of my rose garden when I was 3 years old. The roses were cherished and tended to by me, and on my dream, I was a young woman. I was so sad when the dream stopped and felt I had lost something. Story 101. A cure for most cancers has been discovered, but because insurance companies, medical companies, pharmaceutical companies, and researchers make money by treating and not curing cancer, it's been kept under wraps. Story 102. UFO. I saw one when I was 18. Clear as day, like 100 feet above me. An egg-shaped, orange glowing thing that flickered in and out of visibility until it vanished. For the past 16 or so years, I look up at the sky daily trying to see another one to prove to myself I wasn't just seeing things. Story 103. Companies get reimbursed for actively searching for new employees, but they don't necessarily have to hire those people. As long as the job listing is posted, they get paid. That's where ghost jobs come from. Story 104. The elites, or whatever you want to call them, are slowly depopulating the earth, and people are standing by and watching because they don't believe it's happening. Story 105. The grandchildren of Gen Z will be the first to have an evolved metabolism that metabolizes microplastics. Story 106. Reddit has been invaded by AI bots that ask the same question every day, and somehow it always ends up in the top spot, like 5,000 people didn't just answer the same question yesterday, the day before, and twice on Friday. Story 107. The real reason why they are not teaching cursive no more is because nobody will be able to read old documents from anything. They will be obsolete over time because they will see it as a foreign language. Story 108. That most popular singers are picked for a look or intimacy appeal and can't sing a lick without autotune. Story 109. Cancer cure has been found, but still never be available because cancer treatment is so profitable for pharmaceutical companies. Story 110. Washing machines and dryers are intentionally made to steal at least a single sock every load just to make you have to buy more socks because you're never able to have complete sets. Story 111. The attempted Trump assassination last year was staged by his people. How else was he able to get that perfect shot, pun intended, of him, fist in the air, ear bleeding, while his SS tried to get him to the ground to safety? Oh, and the shooter had been reported, but no one did a darn thing. Police! I knew then he'd won the election. Story 112. Doctors, scientists, and other researchers purposefully ignore women's AFAB people's issues like endometriosis, menstruation, health problems, etc., just to keep us weak and unable to rise up properly. Story 113. That DB Cooper survived the threat from the airliner and used the money he stole to create a website to taunt the FBI. imdb.com. Story 114. The universe always existed and always will exist. It wasn't created, I think, as humans. We expect everything to have a start and a finish. Maybe the universe is the exception. And for religious folk, they already make this jump with their God being immortal or creating itself. So why not the universe? Story 115. Some very powerful people who went to Epstein Island have very incriminating pics and videos of Donald Trump. They will be released if their names appear on the client list. That is why Trump is doing everything he can to avoid the client list from being released. Story 116. Gyms don't care if you show up. The less people that show up, the less crowded they are, less cleaning needed, less cleaning products used, less broken machines, etc. Story 117. Elon downloaded so much personal and confidential data during the Doge period. That was the whole purpose of his involvement. Story 118. Elon was being investigated by the SEC, NHTSA, and FBI, and he bought the presidency, and Doge was a cover to eliminate the work. Story 119. I honestly believe cats secretly understand everything we say, but choose to ignore us when it's inconvenient. I can't prove it, but the way mine stares at me like I'm a fool makes me certain. Story 120. Even though I was there and witnessed to it, I can't realistically testify to it and can only place faith in the system that the reported information is accurate. My birth date. Story 121. Brexit was pushed by politicians on behalf of people organizations who didn't like the EU starting to hold them to account. Absolute disregard for the UK people and the repercussions, and leveraged classic anti-immigrant rhetoric to get it over the line. Story 122. Alien. It seems crazy at first glance, but think about it. A universe so big, do you think there's no one besides us? Story 123. Cancer of any stage can never be cured. It just lies dormant. It might come back in some people and not in others. This is coming from someone who has stage 4 lung cancer for 7 years and have watched those DX with stage 1 that were told they were cured come back to support groups a year or so later with stage 5 form. Story 124. Physical proof for the existence of the soul. I don't think our collective knowledge of physics, medicine, and biology is even close to what we could know. I'm not sure how to label it, probably some undiscovered subdiscipline of physics. It'll prove the soul exists, but will likely fall short of indicating religion. Story 125. I think most people are a lot lonelier than they seem, and everyone carries at least one childhood memory that still shapes them quietly in the background. I feel like timing ends up mattering more than effort in a lot of life decisions, and we meet certain people at just the right moment, even if it feels completely random. And honestly, I believe most lucky situations are really just a bunch of small choices lining up in ways we don't notice until later. Story 126. I believe that there's something more spiritual about us as humans that we don't understand yet. Ever had a dream that felt more real than normal? Dreamt of an event happening only to experience it later in life and feel déjà vu? A dream that felt more like someone, living or dead, was trying to communicate with you. I've read a lot about it, and I believe there's some connectedness we have in another plane of existence that we are unaware of. Story 127. If you switch back and forth checking prices between rideshare apps, then a cheaper price will emerge. Story 128. TVs are super inexpensive because they want to make sure that they are in every home. They want the data from the TV in order to find out everything about you so they can market to you. Your TV is just a way to sell you more stuff. They also know what everyone is watching all the time. Back in the 80s, you needed a Nielsen box to track what certain households watched. Now every TV tracks it, along with how long you are willing to put up with commercials. Story 129. The high number and variety of native languages of pre-Columbian Northern California is the result of it being the first non-coastal, unglaciated expanse of land that people encountered after migrating down the coast when glaciers still covered the interior. Story 130. Hear me out. In 2020, when Charles Booker was running for the Dem nomination to go against Mitch McConnell, he was polling very, very well. He was expected to beat McConnell. He's a black guy from Louisville, Jefferson County, a black city that he was going to win. As votes started being tallied, Louisville polls were still open. He was projected to beat Amy McGrath, a rep in Dem clothes, who had already lost to McConnell more than once. All of a sudden, there was major unexpected traffic due to unexpected construction on the major highway going to the largest, and I think only polling place in Jefferson County. Hundreds of people were stuck in traffic as the polls were closing and couldn't vote. Amy McGrath won by approx. 2. Mitch McConnell's wife is Elaine Chao, the Secretary of Transportation under Trump in 2020. Mitch knew if Amy won the nomination, he already won the election. Dead. Missing words. Added some clarification. I wrote this rushing while boarding a flight earlier. Story 131. George R.R. Martin is intentionally stalling on finishing his books and will not finish the series by the time he dies. His legacy will forever be an unfinished masterpiece and a couple of TV shows because he's too scared that he's not going to be able to write an ending that will live up to the fans' expectations. Story 132. The election system voting is all a spectacle to make us feel we have some kind of control, but it is in fact all just for show. Let them eat cake. Story 133. Bath & Body Works only has about 8, 10 maybe, a few more or a few less base candle scents and just changes the name for different candle scents all the time. Story 134. The rich control everything in the world. They keep us working for our entire lives so that we don't even think about anything else, while they influence governments and policies to make themselves richer. Story 135. That John Lennon, Bob Marley, JFK, MLK, RFK, and a few others all were eliminated for similar reasons by similar people. Story 136. The intel Trump shared with Russia during his first term included Israel's defense secrets, and Russia passed it along to Hamas. Can't prove it, of course, but Putin does love to destabilize Western governments. Story 137. Voting is a scam. Every political candidate new law is pre-selected, pre-decided. The powers that be just have these pretend election days to placate the people. Story 138. Building 7 was never hit by a plane but dropped anyway. The whole thing was an inside job to drag us into a war on terror. The completion of the Orwellian nightmare he tried so hard to warn us against. Answer: I think it was an inside job, but in an easier and less prosecutable way. That the U.S. Republican administration nudged events to get the perfect conditions for a terrorist group to get good training and come here, and then purposefully ignored the intel about an impending attack and did nothing. Because a large terrorist attack is exactly what they wanted to happen. The legislation for the Patriot Act and the loss of our privacy rights was already written and waiting, and it counted on the human need for safety after a big shock to push it through Congress. Add in a big dose of bigotry, and the population wouldn't and didn't resist it much either. Story 139. The majority of people who say they are ADHD or autistic, of both, are not professionally diagnosed. Story 140. Conservative leaders and the wealthy climate denialists know climate change is real, but don't want the public sentiment to shift in favor of stopping its progress. It would take a massive amount of resources to halt climate change. I suspect that the mega-rich proponents of the denialist movement would rather use those resources that, for the most part, they already control, to get ahead and stay on top as the habitable zone shifts. Story 141. My brother visited me 3 times after he died. It was literally him. The only person who believes me is my mom. I could never prove this. It couldn't ever be studied. It's just for me to know. Story 142. The third round fired in the JFK shooting, the one that exploded inside the skull of JFK, was a negligently discharged .223 hollow point that came from the car behind the president, carrying Secret Service agent George Hickey Jr. and his brand new AR-15, not from a 6.8 Carcano, fired by Oswald. Story 143. The containers at NFL games labeled Gatorade do not contain Gatorade. They contain colored water. Gatorade pays for them to dump it on each other. Pro athletes, baseball players, hockey players, football players, they all have team dietitians that dictate what they eat and drink. Gatorade is glorified Kool-Aid. There is no dietitian on the planet that would tell anyone to drink it. Bonus, the fast food that Trump gave to football players was sponsored by the Restaurant Association of America. Story 144. 2016 presidential election was rigged years in advance. Sure, Mitch McTurtle held out a Supreme Court seat if there were any way a Democrat would win and fill it. Story 145. Media intentionally lies to us and pits us against one another. Republicans this, Democrats that, whites this, blacks that, men this, women that, so on and so forth. Modern-day feminism was hijacked by men. Having intimacy with multiple men is empowering in pushing the use of birth control, not for health but for preventing pregnancy, reducing a man's need to worry about paying child support. Antidepressants are intentionally pushed on healthy people who are not depressed. So when the medication makes a healthy patient depressed, they are then sold an add-on to the antidepressant. Story 146. We're at the beginning of a societal collapse. It's just not as bombastic or quick as it seems in movie shows. Story 147. That major sports leagues are soft-rigged, deliberately unfair calls that benefit one team over another, or deliberately target one team. This has gotten significantly worse since betting became legal in the NFL. It's egregious. Story 148. That all public health campaigners are basically moral busybodies who no one liked at school, who get off on telling other people why they can't enjoy themselves anymore. Story 149. That billionaires are trying to deliberately start a global conflict because they want to be the next Genghis Khan. Story 150. The deep space field photograph is made of light that has traveled around the surface of a spherically shaped universe. We are looking at ourselves. It is a picture of us. Story 151. That NDEs are real. I can provide academic sources, including a very recent one from October 2025, to the latest studies with over 2K patients and their reports, books, testimonials, etc., for those with a skeptical mind who like empirical data like myself. But religion has such a negative connotation, perhaps justly earned, that folks don't want to hear any of it. The objections are the same 5 to 10 that everyone says which have been answered, like Jeffrey Long's MD book Evidence of the Afterlife. And it's not even that NDEs have to be a religious thing, but at minimum spiritual, but because all that's often lumped together, the stank of religion permeates into the field, and people push back out of impulse rather than let their curiosity take hold. I would think this is the most important question that every talk show, podcast, radio, news anchor would be talking about because of the age of the internet and all of the studies that have been done. What happens after passing is one of the most important questions, and it seems obvious to me after hundreds of hours investment into the subject, and yet the majority of us don't bother looking into it. Doesn't matter how much we read or hear, though. Ultimately, it does come down to a leap of faith. I believe this simulation was made this way on purpose. I have a few saved videos on NDAers explain why this is, but I've typed enough already. Story 152. I wouldn't be surprised if collecting of oil has anything to do with earthquakes. Have heard it doesn't though, but seems strange to remove so much without it having an impact somehow. Story 153. The Democrats and GOP merged in the 80s and only pretend to be opposed to each other in order to cheat us. Story 154. Keith Richards died in 1986. His brain hasn't figured that out yet, and his body just keeps going. I can't prove this because biological science says it's impossible, that I dropped out in the 3rd grade, and I don't know how substances work. Well, fudge that noise. I want to be an immortal substances zombie too. I'm kidding, obviously. Story 155. That the government put out crack and AIDS for their own purposes. Sure, some people actually take this as a given, but there are so many people that just do not see how the government could do that. Story 156. Lots of memes on social media are now posted slightly blurry, so you have to click on it to expand it to be able to read what it says just to drive more clicks and see what you're engaging with. Story 157. Famous people are insane because antagonistic orgs are flooding their DMs with toxic bots 247. This includes politicians that are convinced their constituents are evil and so give up on them. And corporate executives who think the market is too confusing to serve, so they just find B2B partners and call it. Go IRL and talk to people. All the toxic bot stuff goes away. Story 158. The Origin of Consciousness in the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind by Julian Jayne. The theory that thinking a train of thought in the evolution of humans came about after speech, agriculture, and even some of the earliest cities. A fascinating hypothesis that full-on meta-thinking is very recent, like a few thousand years recent. Story 159. There are higher worlds, and there are people who can see into them. The exercises to obtain those power is out there, and there are initiates who guide humanity in this development. But because it takes deep commitment and concentrated effort to achieve results, for some, decades of commitment, very few reach the level needed to see what some call heaven and others call devachan. Story 160. My fifth grade teacher in the 80s stole my jacket so she could gaslight me into thinking I lost it due to irresponsibility. Fudge you forever, Priscilla Sanders. I hope you caught jerk cancer and lived with it for years. Story 161. Nuclear testing and nuclear disasters have accelerated cancer, and everything is full of radiation. Buying organic won't save you. We have to wait and see if your diet will eliminate you first, or if your genes are good enough to save you. Story 162. A lot of the road eliminate you see was hit on purpose. I watched a squirrel matrix dive backward to avoid getting hit by a truck and realized after generations of surviving hit and runs, they've adapted to avoiding them. But you still see road eliminate all the time. I can count on one hand the animals I've accidentally hit. IDK, I just think people swerve into them on purpose. Something I'll never be able to prove, but yeah. Story 163. OJ did it. Edit for spelling and to add, I watched every minute of that trial. He did it. Chris Darden should not have had OJ try to put the dried up, blood-shrunk gloves on. Story 164. That my so-called best friend stole my favorite hoodie when I was in high school. This fudge had the nerve to show up a month later with the exact same hoodie, saying his mom got it for him. I was too much of a pushover back then due to low self-esteem, so I never confronted him about it. But I've since cut ties with him and have moved on with my life. Story 165. Diddy paid someone to eliminate Tupac Shakur because he wanted to get rid of a rival and that it wasn't his first attempt. Nobody talks about the Quad Studios shooting where Tupac survived getting shot 5 times, but I think that was Diddy. I think eventually Biggie Smalls wanted to squash the East-West Coast thing because he was friends with Tupac at one point, and he loved California. He even wrote a song about wanting to go back. And part of me thinks that in addition to wanting to bury the hatchet with his friend, Biggie maybe found out some things about the shooting after the fact and either threatened to go to the police or Diddy believed he would. So 6 months later, had him shot too. With as much power as Diddy has, he paid off or threatened people to be quiet and paid off police to mishandle the cases. Releasing all of the posthumous work of Biggie's was a way to make money off of his passing. I can't prove any of it, but that's my working unhinged conspiracy theory. Story 166. That when we die, we return to the same state of nothingness for all eternity that we were in before we were conceived. I certainly hope this is true. Story 167. I have a feeling all those stupid mobile games that are kindergarten level easy are just being made to train us to complete menial tasks. La Severance or something like that. Training us to be mindless color pickers or color sorters, etc. Story 168. The Christian heaven is my nightmare. I have no proof there is a heaven or hell. If there are no pets, I don't want to go. Story 169. Most of the older generations are lead poisoned and have cognitive issues. The younger generations are social media poisoned and have cognitive issues. Story 170. While living with my ex and her sons, her eldest raided my comic book collection, stealing all of my first appearances and my most valuable comics. I knew that I had some comics missing, but I wasn't aware that my comic book collection had been so completely raided until a friend looking at my collection informed me that every first appearance that I should have had was missing. For example, to those that aren't understanding, I would have a run of 30 issues of a comic, having every single issue with the only ones being missing were the ones where there was a first appearance of a new character. It happened often enough in my collection that when I was having it appraised, they told me it was obvious that somebody had raided my collection for the first appearances. I blame my ex's oldest son because he was very familiar with comics and was always carrying around a price guide. My comic book collection was in the living room, as it was too large to fit in any other room. He was also known to trade a lot of things to a local nefarious shop owner. The sad part is he probably traded thousands of dollars of comics for a few used video games. Story 171. The Russian invasion of Ukraine isn't meant to succeed. It's nothing more than an actual global theater being used to advance weaponized drones and drone warfare. Story 172. That my brother is still alive, somewhere, even though everyone else has stopped looking. He's not gone, he's just not here. Story 173. There is no God. It cannot be disproven, but I think it's reasonable to assume there's nothing supernatural. We're just a cosmic accident. That's it for this video. Don't forget to support Vancher and my second channel, Vanchus. See you soon.